Today's guest is a former adult film star and expert on sex, attraction, and seduction. Growing up in Australia, he went from high school valedictorian to researching chemistry before transitioning into the world of rated films.
People talk about women being objectified in that industry. My face is probably on screen for like maybe a minute, and the rest of it I'm filmed from the nipple down. I'm literally reduced to just an object.
Working for major studios like Brazzers and House, he witnessed the devastating impact of the porn industry firsthand.
When she said that she didn't want to shoot with the guy, this got leaked onto Twitter. Everybody like attacked her for it. And I thought the idea was it's your body, your choice. But in her case, apparently not. And then unfortunately, she is no longer with us.
Today, he's exposing the dark secrets of the taboo sex industry while teaching millions online how to become the type of man that women actually desire.
Just be decisive. Stop asking her, where do you want to go to eat? Just make the damn decision for her.
In this episode, we'll explore the psychology behind female attraction, uncover the toxic lies the industry teaches about sex, and reveal how to turn lust and sexual desire into a truly integrated lifestyle. What's the darkest scene you ever filmed as a porn star? Sterling Cooper. Welcome to the Jack Neel podcast.
Thank you for having me, mate.
Sterling, how does a valedictorian and published chemist end up starring in films?
How did he do that? Well, I actually had a little bit of a transition phase in between those two things as well, which was I ran a paleo meal delivery business. So I did my chemistry degree, worked as an industrial chemist for a bit, pharmaceutical research chemist for a bit. Didn't really see much like excitement in the job, much career progression in the job. I was sort of like, I'm going to be capped monetarily, and then that kind of put me down the path of entrepreneurship. Ended up going to this conference in Lithuania with a bunch of self-made American millionaires. Came back to Australia after that. Started a paleo meal delivery business off the back of that. Did all right, but we were pretty much capped in the city I lived in, which was the Perth on the west coast. It's the world's most isolated capital city. So there's not much room for growth and expansion when you can't really go anywhere else. Ended up selling that. And then it was at that phase of my life where I was like, well, I just spent the last 2 years grinding and hustling, trying to make all this money. And I was like, well, why did I do that? I sort of just had this really introspective thought. And I was a younger man. And I was like, if I'm being totally honest, I did this so I could make money. Well, why do I want to make money? So I want to make money because I want to travel around the world and be with gorgeous women. If I was being totally honest with myself, I think a lot of young men are probably, similar in that regard. Maybe not everybody, but I think a lot. So I thought, well, why don't I just cut the middleman out and kind of go straight to the source and try to get paid to do that at the same time. And then I kind of reverse engineered my way into it.
So you starred in films for about 5 years. And I know that prior to that, you were a professional male companion. And we'll probably go into that a bit later. But how much did you make from all those shoots?
The totality of the entire career, I think I actually did the math on this not that long ago. I think total, probably $270,000 in total across 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. And how many films did you say you shot during that time?
Over 400. Yeah.
It's roughly $700 for a film, something like that?
A little bit, yeah. Give or take, depending upon who I was shooting for. Yeah.
And then to kind of compare that to what females in the industry make, how much does the average actress make?
About double what the blokes make. Yeah. You could say there's a gender pay gap in that industry.
And then is there also a higher number of female actresses compared to men?
Significantly higher. Yeah, massively. So in terms of the working male talent pool at any given time, it's across all of the United States, it's probably only 30 blokes. And probably 15 of them are doing most of the work. 70% of the 60-70% of the work's going to 15 blokes. And then the other 15 are fighting for the remaining 40-30%. And then women-wise, you're looking at least a couple of hundred, probably 300 total across the United States at any given time that are on an agency's roster or are independent and are working pretty consistently.
And then do you make more money based on specific categories that you do?
The guys don't, but the girls will get danger pay, if you want to put it like that. for, doing things that are a bit more extreme, a bit more taboo, that's when their pay will start to increase. The blokes kind of get just a flat rate. Now, the only difference was if I had to do like a lot of acting and memorizing lines and it was like a multi-day shoot, then you'd get a bit more. But for the actual doing the deed, it's kind of like a flat rate for the blokes. And then the girls that rate will scale depending upon how popular they are, how big their fan base is, because they're the product. They're what the studio is trying to sell. And the guy is like, an analogy I used to use was like, think of like a sports car, right? The woman is like the beautiful chassis, like the exterior, like the leather seats, the color, the wrap. But the bloke is like the engine under the hood that no one's really seen, and it's sort of what makes it go, right? So without him doing his job properly, under high pressure circumstances, shall we say, that product at the end of the day isn't really made, So the women are like absolutely the thing that is sold, but the blokes in the industry are the ones that actually make it, possible. So it's this interesting, dynamic where the guys are. People talk about women being objectified in that industry, and obviously they are, right? Literally a object, right? But the blokes are actually objectified even more when you think about it, because let's say for any given scene, my face is probably on screen for like maybe a minute, right? And the rest of it, I'm filmed from the nipple down, and I'm literally reduced to just an object, right? Whereas on the flip side, the woman is sort of the center of attention the whole time. So it's an interesting industry to be in, especially when you're not like a typical. I'm not the typical guy that was in that industry. Let's just say that much. In terms of my worldview, in terms of my politics, in terms of the way I perceive things, definitely not. Yeah, I definitely stood out.
Got it. Yeah. What I was going to ask here is, this might be a rumor I've heard from other people. I don't remember where I heard this, but it was something along the lines of many straight male actors will often do like homosexual scenes because those pay better, or there's just like looking for more work. Like, what's kind of the stance there?
So when I was in the industry, there was a couple of blokes who had done that previously, who were then like shooting straight stuff, right? But it wasn't a requirement. I never got asked personally. I'm almost insulted by that, on a weird way, because I'm obviously not good looking enough, Jack, but there wasn't like any necessity to go down to do that first before you can get into the straight side of things. Yeah, there was a couple of blokes who had done it previously, and then they stopped doing that and they only did the straight stuff. And then as I was sort of in the last year of my career, like 2019, very beginning of 2020, there was a couple of blokes who were active who were what they would call crossover performers, who did both simultaneously. And there was actually a really controversial episode that I think this happened probably, I want to say 2018, maybe it was 2017. There was a girl who got booked to shoot with a guy, to shoot a regular scene. And we find out like who we're working with maybe like a day before. If it's some studios, maybe a week before, whatever, but usually we find out like text message from our agent, here's who you're shooting with, this is the address, this is what you're wearing, go. And she found out she was booked with a guy who was a crossover performer. So he shoots both homosexual content and straight content. And there's obvious health risks that come along with that, the homosexual side of the industry has a higher risk for things like HIV, obviously, right? This is not a controversial statement, but when she said that she didn't want to shoot with the guy because of that, this got leaked onto Twitter. Everybody like attacked her for it. And this young woman, unfortunately, ended up self-deleting, shall we say, after that, mass online bullying for her personal choice. And it's this weird dynamic in the industry where it's like you can't speak out of the party line. You can't step off the plantation. Like, you have to do what the mass consensus says is the correct thing to do. Yeah, and her sort of expressing her opinion about that and making a personal choice. I mean, I thought the idea was it's your body, your choice. But in her case, apparently not. And she got bullied for that. And then, unfortunately, she is no longer with us. So that was, I believe it was 2017, 2018. And that was, I noticed in, 2019 and 2020, a big push from the industry to try and, let's say, normalize like bisexual content, trans content, crossover performers. And there was even a couple of veteran performers, guys who'd been only in the straight side of the industry for like 10, 15 years or something like this, who were on contract, I believe, to some pretty big companies. And they were, I don't know how that interaction, how that deal went down personally, but they ended up doing either a trans scene or a bisexual scene. And it was like, all of this was sort of happening at the same time. Like, it was just this, that was going on. And then obviously there was the 2020 election, which was, everyone was sort of, that was a very controversial event. There was all this storm of like very political statements, very political things being pushed in an industry which you wouldn't think is very political, but it surprisingly is behind closed doors. Yeah.
Sterling, you've said at least 5 people you've worked with in porn are now dead.
Yeah.
What does the industry do to people's minds?
So there were different circumstances. So there was two guys who are no longer with us. And both of those circumstances, one of them, unfortunately, he got drunk and fell down some stairs whilst on holiday. And the other guy, I believe, actually, no, sorry, there was 2 other guys, both got involved in car accidents. I think at least one of them, I think maybe both of them were on motorcycles. And that got me thinking, and then there was a couple of women who, self-deleted. And those are obviously quite different situations, But I was trying to figure out, like, what's the common denominator here? Like, and because this happens a lot. Like, my first ever AVN Awards ceremony I went to, at the very beginning of the ceremony, there was like a good 5-minute like slideshow reel of like, in memorial to a bunch of people in the industry who had died that year, and they were, putting up their photos and stuff. And these people were not old, I'm like, damn, this is the very beginning of the whole award ceremony. This is pretty dark. And then same thing again the next year. And with these people I knew personally, with the guys, it was this, the pattern that I could really see was that it's very risk-taking guys, which makes sense that they were in this industry. That makes total sense, right? There's a correlation there, right? A bloke is probably going to be less concerned with risk if he's going to end up doing a job that's going to put his, like, every other aspect of his life kind of on the line, So that then correlates to maybe more risky behavior in his personal life, which is how these blokes may have ended up, leaving us. Then with the women, and during that AVN presentation, the in memorial one, there was definitely people who had, again, self-removed. And there's something there about like the psychology of not everyone, but certain women who end up in the industry. There have been a couple of studies that were done on like comparing the broader female population of LA County to performers, specifically women. And at least one of these studies showed correlations, like they were more likely to have come from an adopted home. They were more likely to have, been subject to, let's say, unwanted interactions, at a younger age. They were more likely to be in poverty. A bunch of these things. Obviously not all of them, but they were more likely to. The correlation was definitely pointing in one direction. And you see all these things and you think, well, I'm not sure whether it's a bit of a chicken or egg thing for me. I'm not sure whether these women are self-deleting because of their experience in the industry, or if they were on that path prior to getting into the industry, and one way or another, she unfortunately was heading down that path anyway. And maybe her blasé attitude towards life is what led her into the industry, Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, it's selection bias. The group of people you're picking, those people could have more mental health issues to begin with.
Right. Now, not every girl is like that in the industry, and it's people like to paint every female performer with this brush, that they're all like this, or they all come from a broken home, or they all come from this. That's just not the case. There was a bunch of women who had university degrees. There was a couple of women I knew who actually had basically had one boyfriend prior to getting into the industry. There's others who were super successful because they were extremely professional, very very hardworking is the correct word to say. People are probably going to laugh at that, but professional in every aspect of the business that they could be, and they really really loved the job. They were if there was a job for them, this is probably it. And so, yeah. But then I'd go to work some days, and you'd end up working with a girl, and I'm like, I don't know if you should be doing this job. You just don't seem like you don't. There's a certain energy with different women. The ones who are, who loved it, you're like, she loves it. You can tell she likes doing this job. You can tell she likes being here. It's a laughing day. It's a fun day on set. Everyone's cracking jokes. Everyone's having a great time. It's just easy. And then there was other days where it's like, are you okay, honey? I don't know if you have chosen the right path, And it's almost like they're just going through the routine sometimes. So that was that having that experience, and that was actually an experience I kind of noticed more in America than anywhere else where I worked, because I worked in Europe and I worked in England, and I noticed it more here than anywhere else. But to be fair, I was working more here than anywhere else with more people. So yeah, again, selection bias, right? But there's this aspect of the industry which is just, some women, it's not the path. I mean, you can make the argument that nobody should be taking that path now. And actually, I cannot take that stance now. I don't actually help anyone get into the industry. I've had people reach out to me before. I've had blokes reach out to me and be like, hey, I want to try and have a crack at it. And I just tell them straight up, don't do it. Just don't do it. I'm not going to help you go down this. I could give them a complete step-by-step game plan of exactly how to get into the industry, exactly what to do when you're in there, how to get booked, how to make a career out of it. But I just don't, because it's just, I've very much done a complete 180 on my attitudes towards the adult industry these days.
One thing to think about here, have you guys ever wondered what happens if the government can't pay back the money that it owes? I mean, right now we're $36 trillion in debt, and we're adding another $1 trillion to that every 100 days. So what does the government do? Well, they print more money to fix this, which means that your money is worth less. See, the people who are actually winning right now are the ones who understand Bitcoin, Ethereum, and how crypto works. But that's why I was so happy when the team at Crypto Banter reached out to us for our partnership. These guys have taught over 160,000 people how crypto actually works, but more importantly, how to make money from it. These aren't just courses, they're live workshops and classes where you get to learn and ask crypto experts anything you want.
You brought it together so nicely in a package that I just loved it.
Now I know what I'm doing because I've got the foundation.
You guys break it down so simple. I'm so thankful for you guys.
To unlock the program, you just need to sign up, create an exchange account, and deposit $100, which is your money to trade with, not a fee. So if you guys are interested, just go to jackneel.com/cryptoschool. You can also scan the QR code on screen or hit the link in the description. But anyway, guys, back to the podcast. What's the darkest scene you ever filmed as a porn star?
So this was actually a friend of mine. She actually wrote the script. She wrote it, and she kind of she basically assistant directed it. And she picked me because we'd worked together a couple of times before, and she knew that I didn't cross boundaries. I didn't cross lines. You know, like we have a thing called a no list. In the industry, we have like when we get on set on the day, we have like a do's and don'ts list, so that both performers are aware of what each other are comfortable with doing. You know. And she knew I adhered to that pretty religiously. So she picked me as her co-star for this particular scene, and it was quite dark. Like the storyline was about I was the abusive husband to her in this relationship, both abusive physically, but also like really like mentally and verbally abusive in the script. And so it was really dark. But yeah, I had to like take breaks, between like doing the verbal stuff and then doing anything physical, because I'm not the kind of guy who can rise to the occasion, so to speak, if I'm being abusive and violent in that way to a woman. So that was really, I would normally have never taken that gig. But because I knew the girl who wrote it, like I knew Sovereign, and she asked me personally, I was like, okay, I'll do it for you. Now there was other stuff that I'd shot because I'd worked a bunch for kink.com, who are like the biggest BDSM website, and you'd think that would be darker because a lot of the scripts that we did were typically like a blackmail scenario that was played out. But all of the women who I worked with for that website, for kink.com, doing all these like very, intricate blackmail scenarios, they loved being there. And in fact, they were looking forward to working for that company and working for that website because they got an opportunity to do these very extreme acts with, different toys, devices, tools, and rope. Quite a lot of rope. They were always excited to do that because from their perspective, like there's basically no other opportunity in life for a woman to engage in such an extreme act, right? In an environment which is 100% safe, right? Like you've got like director knows what he's doing, I know what I'm doing, assistant on standby with like water and like emergency scissors to cut like rope if things get if there's blood flow getting restricted or something, like, so it's hyper safe, and there's safe words and there's everything, so they were it was interesting to see that dynamic, how excited a lot of these women were to shoot these scenes and like tick that off their bucket list, I guess. And even though the actual like, even though the scripts might be perceived quite dark, with that company, we always did before and after interviews specifically of the women. And yeah, you look at the before interviews, they're bubbly and giggly and really excited. You look at the after interviews and they've just got this massive smile on their face. It's like euphoric. Like there's this sort of catharsis that happens when they're in that very extreme scenario. And I know I can't get into details about that, but I can let people use their imagination about, the kinds of things we were doing. But that was interesting. Yeah. Surprisingly not as dark as you would have expected from that type of content.
Let me ask you about the first scenario. So you mentioned that the female who had wrote the script for you to perform in, like, selected you to kind of do it with her. Do you think that was this was content we're producing that we think will generate a lot of revenue, or do you think that was a bit of like kind of what she wanted to do? And do you think it's common for directors to do casting and writing based off?
With her, it was an artistic expression. Yeah, she wanted to create something that she had this idea for a story behind it. She wanted to try and like tell it. She wanted to tell a story that like women who were survivors of such scenarios could maybe like relate to and get some, I guess, closure with. Yeah, that was my interpretation of her and of the art she was trying to make with that. Yeah, and there are circumstances where like a lot of new directors, like performer directors rather, will like pick certain people that they know in the industry to play certain parts and to act along lines, especially if it's their first or second like ever production. Yeah, because they know who they've worked with, who they can relate to, and they know who's good at what, and they know who can act and all these sort of things.
Does this ever get into like a weird area though, where directors are writing certain scripts, picking certain actors and actresses, and they're kind of living out their fantasies, or do you find it more professional than that?
It's more professional than that. A lot more professional than that. Now, again, to contradict myself, there are certain small scale productions which are basically just like one guy, and he's like booking girls through like an agency. In that scenario, it's basically him picking the girls he would like to enjoy, but he's paying the day rate, signing the contracts, doing all the press releases, and he's got a website off the back of it, so it's plausible maybe it's plausible deniability, but it's plausibly a business, and it's plausibly still a website that people are subscribing to and stuff like that. That is obviously like on the smaller scale of things, but that does still exist. It definitely exists.
So to maybe touch back to what you were saying earlier about some of the political choices that were being made around 2017 to 2019 within this specific industry, who actually owns the adult film industry?
Well, so the biggest player in the game, they've since changed the company name, but it used to be at that time was probably Mind. Yeah, I think they switched hands in like probably 2019. But before that, it was Mind Geek. Now, I believe they're called Ethical Capital, is the owner of. Basically, that's the megacorp that owns Pornhub. They own Brazzers. I think it's Reality Kings as well. I think there's a couple more like free tube sites under that umbrella as well, and probably a couple more like brands, like Brazzers is like a brand. That's how we would call it. So they got this sort of conglomeration of different websites and stuff. That's Ethical Capital Partners is actually owned by a rabbi, believe it or not. But they're the biggest player in the industry. Now, there's other big like conglomerates. One of them is the people who own like X Videos, which is like a major rival to Pornhub. They're based out of Hungary. And then another big player is the company that owns I think it's someone that owns Penthouse, and they own a bunch of others. Yeah, so there's like kind of three real big players in the industry, like that make most of the moves. Yeah, and they people often ask like, how do people even make money in this industry when then 90% of it's online and it's free and whatever, right? Well, it's because they own the whole funnel from the top to the bottom. So all these free sites are actually part of a big funnel to get people into the paid sites. Kind of like, I mean, it's literally a model copied off the YouTube model, right? But think about like, as a recent example, think about a YouTube creator who has like a Patreon, right? So like, here's my free content on my YouTube, and now subscribe to my Patreon for more exclusive content, right? Or perks and bonuses, right? It's kind of the exact same model. And you might think like, surely there's not that many people out there willing to pay money to watch this kind of content. Well, you don't need a large percentage to convert to being a buyer when you have almost infinite traffic. Like it's like Pornhub is, I think it's in the top 5 most visited sites on Earth. Yeah, like it's definitely in the top 10, but I think it might be in top 5. Like it's a lot of traffic. Like it's unbelievable, ungodly amounts of traffic, So when you've got that much, like, and they're a data company. That's the other thing people don't realize. All these companies now are big. They're actually kind of like Google. They're constantly like analyzing the algorithms, constantly analyzing the user data, the trends, the searches. And another thing you'll notice is that everything is now in that sphere, everything is a search term. So there's an interesting thing. There's this sort of period in a woman's career where it's kind of like a slump. And it's typically from the ages of like 25 to like maybe 30. So prior to that, when she's younger, let's say 18 to 24 range, right? She typically probably looks younger, and they will present her as this younger woman. They use the term teen to describe basically any woman in that age range, right? But that is a searchable term, which basically means younger looking woman, right? And then when you get into your 30s, a lot of the women in the industry will end up getting a boob job or a BBL, right? Lip fillers, all these sort of to accentuate these kind of character traits that make her look more like a MILF and fit that MILF category. And then that is also a searchable term on these websites. But there's no searchable term for that 6-year gap in the middle, which is basically like mid-20s woman. That search term doesn't exist, right? So these women actually have a slump in their career where it's harder for them to get work during that kind of time period. And then the other thing you'll never see anymore is just two people fall in love and consummate their relationship. There's no search term for like two normal people getting along and having a good time. Like, so instead they have all these different scenarios like stepdad, stepmom, stepsister, like all this ridiculous shit. Because there's no search term that they built for just regular people having a good time. Like everything is a search term because it's one giant search engine, and they want to look at the data of what people are more likely to click on. Yeah, it's all big business and it's all big data.
I would guess those are some of the most lucrative businesses in the world.
Well, and then you talk about, the big fish, which is OnlyFans, came along, who are also massive. They're a massive donor to what is it? I believe it's APAC. Yeah,
it sounds familiar.
Yeah, massive donor to APAC, but they're now the big swinging dick in the whole industry because they basically came along and took a giant chunk of. Well, maybe probably didn't take a giant chunk of it, but what they did is they allowed like all these actresses who were kind of beholden to the big studios to make their income, and gave them an opportunity to capitalize on their massive fan bases. And that was kicking off like 2019, but then exploded 2020. And you saw I knew a lot of directors who were like struggling because they were like, we can't get the talent. Everyone's staying at home shooting for OnlyFans or whatever. Like, so they're the blokes who are running around every day, setting up cameras and doing all the filming and organizing stuff. They're like, they're all they were running out of work because it created this really weird dynamic. So, there was everything like, it's kind of interesting that the adult industry tends to be at the forefront of like leading technologies.
I wanted to ask before you continue on that. Do you see OnlyFans as a necessary evil though? Because it kind of gives women some of the more money opportunities instead of going straight to the big company.
I don't like what it's turned into, because it's turned into you now have girls in high school considering OnlyFans as a legitimate career option, which is horrendous.
It's just more so normalized. It's
completely normalized it.
You don't think the necessary evil could be like making it safer for some of the existing actresses, or do you think it's probably less safe?
I mean, look, it totally like gives them more of an independent income, and obviously, they can choose like who they're working with and whatever. So in a sense, it does make it a bit more safe. Well, yeah, kind of yes and no, because like you don't have a whole. It's not a studio behind it. You don't have like if she has to do all the vetting and all the consent work, you know what I mean, and tick all the boxes legally and stuff. Maybe not.
Most people likely aren't doing that.
Yeah, precisely, right. But then it's completely normalized, like online sex work for women all over the world, and it's staggering, like how many young women are turning to that as like a career option. And a lot of it is delusion, because the average creator on OnlyFans only makes like $200 a month. The vast majority of the money is only being earned by like less than 1% of the creators. And so, but that's all the stories you hear, all these big sensationalist stories, like I think it's Sophie Ryan, or is it Sophie Ryan, whatever. She's here in America. Then you got your Bonnie Blues and stuff who do all these very extravagant, clickbait things to get more attention and stuff. And and that's everywhere on the internet too. You see it on Facebook, you see it on Instagram, you see it on Twitter, you see it everywhere. And then a young girl sees that, and she's like, well, this seems like easy money. And then she doesn't realize that these girls have like an entire marketing team behind them. They have an entire army of typers behind them, talking to every single subscriber, milking him for as much money as possible. And then she puts her new body on the internet for everyone to see in her hometown. And now she's only making $200 a month or whatever, and she can't take that back now. So it's definitely not a good thing.
To continue on your point about technology, I think you were saying something along the lines of how porn kind of shapes how technology acts.
Right, yeah. So if you go back, there was a competition between VHS and Betamax. You're too young to know what the hell those things are.
I think I've seen a VHS.
But I remember what they were. I remember what VHS was anyway. And VHS beat Betamax because the adult industry chose VHS. And then you flash forward a few more years, and then like DVDs beat Blu-ray because the adult industry chose DVDs. Same thing again. And then YouTube came on board, and like the adult industry jumped on that model and just exploded it, And then OnlyFans again like saw things like Patreon and these other things and kind of iterated that and took it to a whole nother level. So and VR is definitely the forefront of like VR goggles and VR technology. A lot of that work has been pioneered by the adult industry. Loads of it. And now we're getting to the stage where I'm seeing stuff about like synthetics, robots, and these kind of things, like very realistic looking ones. Actually know girls who've been modeled for them, and you're starting to see like again that industry is sort of putting a lot of money into that kind of technology. It's kind of crazy. Yeah.
It's really fascinating. A previous guest a couple weeks ago was this guy, Chris Camillo, and he's probably the number one investor of all time, like 70% returns for like 17 years. He's insane, but his next biggest bet is these AI robots. And he kind of trades based off like catching trends. I wonder if he's thinking about the porn industry kind of leading that and making those things bigger. That's interesting. Yeah, and then also like a big trend among people my age is like, what's the quickest way to make money? And AI mobile apps are definitely one of those things, but a lot of it, the ones that are really lucrative are more sexually oriented.
There's loads of AI OF models now. Loads of them. Yeah. Yeah. Twitter's flooded with bots for that stuff as well.
Do you think watching OnlyFans ruins your sex life?
I think watching porn of any kind can really screw up a guy's sex life. Yeah.
I'd be curious of your perspective on like the men developing relationships with these women and like chatting with them and loving one versus like watching porn every day. Like which is like kind of worse.
You know what's interesting though is that the vast majority of paying users on OnlyFans are in a relationship already. Now think about that for a second, right? Why would they turn to something like an OnlyFans? Like what possible benefit are they getting? And the answer to that question is that they're getting intimacy. These men, even though they're in a relationship, they feel so unheard, underappreciated, underloved, underrespected perhaps, that they turn to a fake, transactional online relationship just so they can feel like a woman cares about them. So they can, even though in the back of their mind they know it's fake, they'll suspend that disbelief for however long they're online chatting, and they can get that degree of intimacy they're missing in their real relationship. They can get it from the person typing on the other end of a computer screen, who is in most circumstances probably a dude anyway, which is hilarious when you think about it. But that's what they're actually searching for. It's not actually like, yes, obviously like OnlyFans sells sex, but a lot, like most of the blokes who are spending a lot of money, it's in regards to that lack of intimacy in their life. Yeah, it's like they're having a substitute relationship with this online model because their real life relationship isn't quite doing it for them.
Does that surprise you that men are chasing intimacy more rather than sex?
Not really, because you can get free online adult content any way you want, you know? So that aspect of things is basically free for them. But the thing they can't get is a woman to tell them that they're a nice guy. No, a woman to tell them that they're sexy. A woman to tell them that they're attractive. That's what they're paying for, right? The average guy doesn't get that experience. The average guy can remember the last time anyone ever gave him a compliment, if they have ever received one. You know, the old lady at the checkout line said he looks cute. He remembers that for 20 years, right? So I'm not that surprised that men are like turning to this as like a substitute. And I think a big part of that actually is women aren't really, this is a bit of a segue, right? But I don't think we teach women how to seduce men anymore. And that might sound a bit weird, but let me break this down, right? We teach women to sexualize themselves. That we definitely do. All of society is just pushing women towards being more sexualized, right? You know, wearing tighter clothes, more revealing clothes, less clothes, getting on OnlyFans, posting provocative photos on their Instagram, all this sexualization to get the male gaze, to get male attention, right? But with all that, you still have men who are in relationships paying for OnlyFans to get intimacy from an online model. So that tells you something. That tells you that we haven't taught women how to actually seduce men anymore. We've just taught them to be hypersexual, not actually seductive, because I think those two things are very, very different. Because to be seductive, a woman has to actually hold something back. Think about a stripper, okay? Why are strippers sexy? Strippers are sexy because they use what's called coquetting. Coquetting is push-pull in an intimate context. So she puts her boobies in your face, she puts her rear on your lap, and then you go to grab her leg and she slaps your hand away. It's a push and a pull at the same time, right? And that is seductive. Now, she is obviously, scantily clad, but you put that into the context of a relationship, and what an example of that would that translate into? It would be something like, his wife or his girlfriend sending him a provocative photo while he's at work, or sending him a raunchy text message while he's at work, revving his engine up before he gets home, building some anticipation. There has to be something to anticipate. There has to be some unknown to create sexual tension. You know what I'm saying? And if you, an example from my personal life, I've dated girls in the past where they would like walk around the house totally naked all the time. And I found, when I look back on it, I found, that actually ruined a lot of the sexual tension, because her naked form is no longer special. It's there all the time. Like she's doing the dishes in it when she's completely nude or whatever. She's brushing her teeth completely nude. Like it doesn't create an opportunity for you to miss the naked form of her. So there's no tension, there's no anticipation. It destroys that aspect of the intimacy. And I think seduction is kind of tied into like making her skin scarce in a way. My current girlfriend has this thing where she uses an old school technique called the rule of threes when she dresses. It's an old school technique where she only shows, like between legs, arms, and cleavage, she'll only show one of those three at a time with her outfits. So if she's showing cleavage, her arms and her legs are covered up, and then so on and so forth. So when she's walking around, it's like she's a candy still in its wrapper, And it's like, oh, when we get home, there's something for me to reveal, which creates that sexual tension, which makes it exciting still, which is seductive. I think it's seductive, So I think, women have been taught to be hypersexual, but actually not seductive at all.
What are some things men can do to be more seductive in relationships, or like once you've kind of already started dating the person?
What's really simple, and I get so many women agreeing with this. Just be decisive. Stop asking her what she wants Like, stop asking her, where do you want to go to eat? You know? Just make the damn decision for her, for both of you, because you're in a relationship. It's little subtle, like, decisiveness is so attractive to women, men completely forget about it. Like, because think about how many guys you know who end up in the situation where they get frustrated because they'll ask their missus, you know, a basic question like, where do you want to go to eat? And she'll reply back to him, I don't know, where do you want to go? And he'll get frustrated at that because he's been taught that he needs to be, you know, egalitarian and equal in all decision-making processes in a relationship. And I don't think that's true. I think most women will be far happier with a man who is much more decisive with things. Like, to give you context, like, on a lot of the first dates that I take women on, I'm telling them, we're going here, wear this dress I've seen on your Instagram account or whatever, you know, for
that's
context.
good.
Like, wear that outfit, and then I'll order the food for us because I know the restaurant and I know what's good on the menu and I've been here before. And I'll order a couple of sample of things we can share together, and I'll order stuff that we can share because I know what's good. And I've just taken all of the thinking burden like off of her prior to the date and on the date, so she can just relax. And a lot of women are so full of this sort of baseline anxiety from just living in the Western world where they have to be both a man and a woman simultaneously. They have to go to work and put on their masculine energy and be competitive in a work environment, make decisions in the work environment, have responsibilities in their work environment, right? And then they get home to their man and he's asking them where they want to go for dinner. That frustrates women, right? So if you want her to be more feminine and soft around you, then be more decisive so she can relax into that feminine and relax into that softness. You'd be surprised how simple that is, like just being decisive with things. And it's not to say that you don't value her opinion, but know when she doesn't care that if you ask it or not. There's certain instances like where you're going for dinner, she actually doesn't care. And she would much rather you just make a decision. If you don't actually know, maybe you're new to dating this woman, you don't actually know where she wants to go eat. An easy cheat question to ask her is, you won't believe what restaurant I've booked us in for tonight. And then see what answer she gives you back. And then go and book that one.
Mine for this is steak or sushi. And then it's the same place we're going to anyway.
Yeah.
And it just happens to have steak or sushi.
It's got both on the menu.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'll ask is the only screening question I would have asked is like, are you allergic to anything? Or is there anything you don't like? If she's allergic to fish, like I'm not taking her to a sushi restaurant, right? Or is there anything that you really just don't like? I'd rather get like her massive nose and then I'll figure out what she really likes later on. Like, but the massive nose, because like if you're trying to make a good first impression, right? Especially if it's a new relationship, women will very often and people in general will associate negative experiences with a person, even if that person didn't cause a negative experience. You know what I'm saying? Like, go to take a woman out on a date and then suddenly, you know, a tragedy strikes in her family. And women do use this as an excuse to flake on a guy. I know that, but occasionally it has happened in the history of the world where a woman has actually had a tragedy in the family and she's had to cancel a date, right? But you are now kind of tainted with that experience, and so she will associate you subconsciously with that negative experience. It's kind of crazy. Yeah.
What do you think it signals then when you enter a relationship with someone and you've made decisions consistently and then they start to not trust your decisions, or they start to be a bit argumentative to your decisions? Like if you say, hey, we're going to McDonald's, you know, what's kind of the nuance there?
Yeah, I think it's an indicator of like a deeper issue somewhere else. Because if she's not, obviously depends context, like how long have you guys been going out together, right? But if she starts to lose faith in your decisions, it's an indicator that you've lost her respect somewhere else. You know, like there's a couple of things that women really don't like, and one of them is like being a complete tight ass. So like being very tight with money, like, because that's a subconscious like signal of a lack of resources. You might not have many resources to throw around. You might actually be quite frugal with your money, but verbalizing it, like being very, I see a lot of boomers do it, like where they, at least back home, where they nitpick and complain about the price of things. That's never an attractive look for a man in front of a woman. Keep that to yourself. Like keep that, like that whinging, that complaining about the price of things. Try your best to not let that just come out around your woman, because even though you might still have a budget, subconsciously you're pushing on a button in her monkey brain that is not good. You know, the other one is being a coward, being cowardly, and it's hard to find there's not many opportunities in the real world where like a situation arises where it comes up where you have an opportunity to prove that you're not a coward. But if if there's a situation does arise and you act very cowardly, that will imprint on her brain and you will instantly lose respect from her. And you'll start to get questions like the one you just asked. Yeah.
Sterling, you've said the number one male trait that actually turns women on is not what men think. What is it? And why do you believe society has lied to men about female desire?
I think society has lied to men about female desire because it's convenient to have. It's easier to control a population when you've got families that are divided. When the man is at home and he has to like contend with his wife, he's in conflict with his wife or his girlfriend, he doesn't have time to like rebel against the injustices in our society. He's got a war at home. So if he's got a war at home, he can't fight war like outside of his home, So strong families make strong nations, And if you have a strong relationship is built on an understanding of like basic male-female dynamics and what like that we have, like we are made for different purposes. We have very clear different strengths and weaknesses, men and women, And when people are in there, I think when women and men are in a more traditional structure and a more traditional role, harmony ensues. Things happen a lot smoother. There's never going to be like 100% peaceful. Like there's always going to be some conflict. But if everyone understands their role in the relationship, like he's the breadwinner, he's the leader of the household, she's maybe this, the analogy you can use sometimes is like he's the captain of the ship and she's the first mate. Like she keeps the crew in line. Who are the crew? The kids, right? But he's the one who's setting the course, and is ultimately responsible for things that happen. And he's responsible for the safety of everybody, right? And then she makes sure that the crew, the kids, follow his lead. It is not to say that he disrespects her. It's not to say that he doesn't take her opinion on board, but there's a clear hierarchy. Say, like if you asked couples and you say, who is the leader in this relationship? Every time that either the man or the woman says, oh, we're equal, I guarantee you the woman's leading the relationship. Because in every dynamic between people, there is always a hierarchy. It doesn't matter. It doesn't know what situation it is. Every workplace is a hierarchy. Every personal, like amongst your group of friends, there's always somebody who's typically like more of the leader of the group, right? And obviously that can change situationally in different contexts, based upon people's strengths and weaknesses or whatever, right? Maybe on the football field, this one particular friend is like much better than you, but at the bar, there's another guy who's more charming with women or something, right? So that's obviously situational, but every time that, you've got a couple when they think they're egalitarian, all that means is that the guy is deferring like responsibility and leadership and decision-making to the missus all the time. He thinks this goes back to the example we talked about before, about being decisive and deciding where to go to eat. Like something as simple as that. If he's not being decisive and leading, then she is by default. And she will resent it eventually. On a long enough time frame, she'll resent it. I'll give you a really good example. I met this woman recently in London, and she was a go-getter, like very influential. She did like a lot of kind of club promoting and networking and kind of connecting people together, but connecting very influential people together, like high-powered men. We were having this conversation. I said, she was talking about the guys she meets, and they'll be very successful, very well networked, like millionaires, like, men of power and industry. But around her, because she's so decisive and she's so like confident and assertive most of the time. Around her, she didn't respect these men on a certain level because she could make them buckle. Because, they're probably not used to being, or most men don't want to be like argumentative, with a woman, so she's like, in that context, showing them around the club or networking things together. They're kind of, being submissive to her in that context. And so she didn't respect any of them. And she turned around and she said to me, but if I find a man who lets me just switch off, who I can respect and who can lead me, her exact words were, I just melt. And I think that's a perfect adjective for that. The emotion, the sensation, the feeling you want to give your woman is that feeling of just melting away. Like you see photos of when a woman, if you study body language, right, and you see photos of a woman who truly adores her man, it's always this like doting, like puppy dog eyes looking up at her man with adoration. And that is that feeling of melting. Like she trusts him to keep her safe. She trusts him to lead, And I think that is kind of the big crux there of being like a leader in the relationship. And that means being a leader in basically every context.
So would you say that the number one trait that women are craving is dominance or it's leadership?
Well, I think those three things are synonymous. I use the word dominance because it means more in a sexual context, but people can have a negative connotation with that word. They can associate things with it that I don't mean. They can associate very negative things with the word dominance.
Really quick, do you have a 401k or an IRA, or you're someone that happens to have a lot of money in crypto? If so, this is a cheat code, so please listen. Guys, the biggest supporters of this podcast right now are the team at iTrust.Capital. When they reach out to me and explain what they do, I thought that it wasn't legal. By the way, it is legal. So with their platform, you can convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-advantaged crypto account. So inside of it, you can buy Bitcoin, ETH, 80 other cryptocurrencies while getting all the same tax-saving benefits. So obviously, they'll let you start a new IRA on their platform if you're someone who's bullish on Bitcoin and wants to save money on taxes. But if you have a lot of crypto already and you're worried about it getting hacked or stolen, iTrust also offers a PCA account, which gives you institutional grade security, meaning your assets are fully insured, ultra secure, and never sitting on any risky exchanges. So if you want to try it out, just go to itrustcapital.com/Jack Neel. Just use the code JACK8 for an easy $100 bonus. You can also scan the QR code on screen or hit the link in the description. But anyway, guys, back to the podcast.
Do you define dominance as just kind of like leadership, and then when there's pushback, you still push through and are a leader, I guess?
Yeah, it's assertiveness. It's leadership. It's assertiveness. It's in a sexual context specifically. It's a little bit more. Maybe it's being. Another word you might use for that is passionate. There's a certain way that you can make love, which is showing your strength. It's not rose petals on the bed, candlelit dinner, like laying her down softly on the pillows and stuff like that. It's more like a Roman legionnaire coming home after 2 years campaigning in the forests of Germany. How does he take his woman when he comes back and he sees like she's been, faithfully waiting for her man for 2 years, and he's been off slaughtering people? How does that guy take his woman? It's probably not rose petals gently laying her down on the bed. It's probably a bit more passionate. That is the kind of thing I'm talking about when I say dominance, when I say passion, when I say leadership in the bedroom. It's a certain way of operating, which women respond extremely well to because it allows them to melt.
Is there ever a place for the rose petals and the Valentine's Day and all that stuff? But would you say it's more like an 80-20? You have to balance it because you don't, if you're not being, the reason I specifically teach this method, this way of operating, right, is because I think most men are lacking it. Most men aren't lacking the softness. You know what I'm saying? If a guy was a bit too aggressive in everything, well, maybe he needs the bit of the rose petal stuff.
you know? But the average guy doesn't, because the average guy is kind of getting walked all over by most women, you know? So he needs to develop a bit more self-esteem and self-confidence in the way he carries himself both inside and outside the bedroom. And I look at the bedroom as actually a bit of a microcosm of the relationship outside the bedroom. If you have, and I've had students of mine literally tell me this, like, oh, I started applying these principles you're talking about of being more of a leader, being more passionate, being more dominant in the bedroom. And now she's not nagging me to take the bins out anymore. Now she's cooking and cleaning again, and we're not arguing anymore. Because you're satiating an anxiety in her subconscious mind. And that anxiety that every woman has and always has, and it doesn't really ever go away. You can just, it's like a whack-a-mole. You can just like keep dealing with it, and then it comes back again, you deal with it again. That anxiety is, did she pick the right guy? She's constantly second guessing it. And it's not necessarily a conscious thing. It's a subconscious just feeling of baseline anxiety that comes up every now and then. And the way to one of the best ways to sort of get rid of that baseline anxiety is by demonstrating your strength. You know, the way I phrased it before is showing that you are a man who has the capacity for violence. Doesn't mean be violent at all, but you have the capacity for it. You know, this is the reason why guys who are fighters have no problem with women. You ask any guy who's a professional fighter, like, or even an amateur fighter, but a good one, like a guy who carries himself with the knowledge that he is capable of violence, they don't have any problem with women, for the large majority of them, at least. Like, because there's something in their character that demonstrates that they are safe to be around. They can protect her, you know? That's what, you know, passionately throwing your woman onto the bed does. That's what, like, picking her up and carrying her through the doorway does. These little subtle, like, you're just demonstrating that you are stronger than her in a lot of ways, you know? And that's, like, even things like grabbing her hand and leading her somewhere. Like, it's all of these things tied together. They deal with that constant second-guessing anxiety that women always have about, did they pick the right guy? Am I actually safe with this guy long term?
Do you think, though, that a woman is able to feel submissive and safe if you're not paying for everything?
It's a good question. Yeah, I think she can. But there's an element of that which is how superficial is that individual woman? Because certain women are obviously a lot more inclined to being, you know,
or just at least expecting more because they come from a wealthy family.
Yeah, they come from a wealthy family, or that's the lifestyle that they're used to. So they're used to a certain level of life. A lot of women will not compromise on their lifestyle to be in a relationship. So that is creating conflict between men and women, especially as women are getting sort of selected a lot more for high-paying jobs than men. They're getting a lot more access to higher education, these kind of things. So it's creating this sort of income discrepancy where, like, women want a guy who can provide for them, but the men aren't working jobs that make more than the woman does. You know, so it's obviously not everyone, but that gap is ever increasing. But I don't think, like, women aren't accountants. So if she doesn't know how much money you make, if you don't like lay out your tax returns in front of her, you know, it's more about like a lifestyle than it is about an actual number of what's going on. You just have to pick a woman who's probably a bit on the easygoing side. That's what I like to do. That's what I've done, is pick a woman who doesn't really, like, who comes from a pretty middle class family.
Have you paid for like a woman's stuff before?
Yeah. I pay for all of our pay for all of our flights together. I pay for everything. I actually don't let her pay.
But you don't live together, right?
Not yet.
Yeah, I never asked Waller about that, but
I mean, he doesn't really let it. I know that Justin doesn't let his woman pay.
And I guess the living together situation, like, is that something? Right. It's something Andrew and Tristan have kind of preached. You live with men, and then like the women live together, something along those lines. But
yeah, and there is a lot of merit to that concept, because like I'm pretty sure there have been studies which show that men's like testosterone declines when they live with women, and especially when they live with children. You know, so if you want to stay hyper competitive in the business world or anything like that, then it makes sense to spend more of your time around men than women. And I do think that there is a lot of merit to engineering time apart. Like some guys have that naturally from their work. They're traveling a bunch. They go on work trips, road trips, whatever. You know, so they're away from their wife and their family for extended periods of time, and absence makes the heart grow fonder. So when you're away, she can't really miss you if you're up in each other's business 24/7. You know, and that's where a lot of people end up going from being like lovers to being friends. You know, the sex life dies because you're just too familiar with each other. So I actually think it's a good idea for couples to engineer time apart. Like actually, like him going on the lads trip, the lads weekend is actually a really positive thing for the relationship. And a lot of women I know will sort of guard that. They don't want him going out with the boys and stuff like that because I know what they're worried about. Like they think he's going to cheat on her or something like that, which is very unlikely with most men. Most men don't have the level of like game of like a Justin Waller, for example. They just don't. So that time apart is super, super important.
What do you do if your wife hates sex?
Well, I'm not married, so it's people give me shit for trying to give marriage advice and stuff like this. So I always try to relate it back to just like relationship and sex advice for everybody. But if she doesn't like sex, it means she doesn't like you. She doesn't like sex with you. That's what that means. Like, she's not asexual. Like, that is really not the case. Like, you were having sex at some point when you got together. You know, the situation of a dead bedroom, which happens with a lot of long-term relationships, I think this ties back into a lot of these things we talked about earlier, which is like engineering time apart. If you're up in each other's business all the time, you end up becoming friends, not lovers. I think decisiveness, because a woman is always going to be like testing you. You know, again, this is that kind of lingering like uncertainty in the back of a woman's mind about did she pick the right guy?
Do you think they're more concerned with whether or not this guy's going to leave me, or if she picked the best one that she could?
If it's in a situation where she like no longer wants to have sex with him, it's 100% the case where she's worried that she picked the wrong guy. She's definitely not worried about him cheating on her. If it's a dead bedroom, she knows that he is not going to get laid somewhere else. She is certain of that. That's why she's not having sex with him. Because no other woman will. Like he's, in her mind, is now fundamentally unattractive.
So most problems kind of stem from either the woman thinks she's cheating or he's cheating and she doesn't feel safe, or she just doesn't feel like she picked the right guy and wants to find another one.
Yeah, well, the two very different sort of types of anxiety, right? Is like one is competition anxiety, right? Which is like, is another woman going to steal my man from me? You know, that's female jealousy, right? That's what that is. It's actually competition anxiety. Because female jealousy and male jealousy are two very different emotions. Like when a man's jealous, it's almost like a feeling of betrayal. You know, like his heart's been ripped out because he's like invested in a woman, and then she's, you know, if you're thinking biologically, oh, he's going to end up raising some other man's kids, right? That's kind of where that feeling comes from. With a woman, it's like, oh, like another woman is going to come in and steal this man away from me and end the resources and attention and safety he can give me. So it's a competition anxiety. It's less of a betrayal feeling. It's more of it's just being competitive. So those are the two different situations there are. Is she worried about him finding another woman and replacing her, or is she worried that she picked the wrong guy? The other situation, she ends up being resentful of the guy, and she'll lash out at him, be bitter and resentful, and constantly poke him, constantly undermine him, demean him, and basically like treat him very disrespectfully. You'll see this like lots of guys are in that situation, unfortunately, and it's basically because she doesn't respect him, doesn't think he's attractive anymore, and her evolutionary brain is like, you picked the wrong guy, you know, and maybe she's got his kids already. That tends to happen as well.
How do you reverse this?
A lot of the same Like it's much easier to set the framework from the very beginning. You know, all these same things I talked about, where it's about decisiveness, leadership, not being a coward, not being frugal, right? Not giving her an opportunity to massively lose respect for you, right? If you can set this frame from the very beginning, it makes things much, much, much easier. But if you're in a situation where obviously these things have already happened, right, you've got a lot of work to do. You've got to repair all that. And you've got to repair like this uncertainty in her head, basically. Now, it's not a nice answer, but there is probably nothing that will do that faster than jealousy. There is, like, it doesn't mean you have to step out. It doesn't mean you have to go and cheat on your missus. But what you need to do is demonstrate to her that other women find you attractive at the very least. And not in a overt, in her face kind of way. It has to be done in a very subtle way so that she notices it and doesn't think you're doing it on purpose and trying to shove it in her face. So that's not a very easy thing to do. But it involves, well, maybe you're out of shape. Maybe you need to work on your social skills and your networking. Maybe you actually don't have enough resources to take care of a family. You know, maybe there's aspects of your life that you need to work on and build up. And in doing so, in the process of that, you will build self-esteem, you will build confidence, and you might just find that other women start staring you down a bit more. They start paying attention to you. They start noticing you a bit more. And bringing her into these environments where other women are paying you attention and paying you respect, or at the very least, other men are respecting you, starts to get rid of that selection anxiety that she has, where she's like, maybe I did actually. Now she's starting to think, maybe I did pick the right guy. Okay. Like, all these people are giving him attention now. They're giving him respect now. He's actually maybe not as bad of a choice as I initially thought. So you've got to, it's a fine dance, right? Between like, does she have this resentment towards you, or does she have competition anxiety where she thinks other women are going to take you away? You would much rather be closer to that one, where she has at least some competition anxiety where she thinks women are going to take you away, because it guarantees that she's not putting you in a disrespectful situation where she's not having sex with you and doesn't want to be with you. You know? So it's an unfortunate conundrum of the female condition, I think.
Would you say the most actionable step a guy can take who feels as though his girl doesn't respect him or his wife doesn't respect him is just setting up a situation where she sees him being respected by others?
Yeah. And respected by others or being given attention by others. So status is the strongest aphrodisiac. Status trumps everything. Like, people talk about, like, you know, making a bunch of money. People talk about being like jacked and tall and handsome and all this sort of stuff. Status beats everything. All of that. Like, I guarantee you can find a guy who's like, I guarantee you can find a club promoter in Vegas who is out of shape and isn't even making that much money, but has all the status in a certain situation. Like, it's the thing that trumps everything else. And the interesting thing with that is that people very often conflate like status and attention, like visual or verbal attention. So, I mean, you know this, you run a YouTube channel. People will probably recognize you, you know, you've got this omnipresence online. And with that comes a degree of status because by the virtue of the fact that people are giving you attention. You, like, if you rewind the clock, like evolutionary clock, so to speak, well, usually what it used to be the case where you got attention because you had status. Like, you were a respected leader in the tribe or whatever, and then because of that, everyone gave you attention. Now we're in a world where that is kind of hackable, and you can flip it on its head. By virtue of the fact that people are giving you attention, they then assign status to you, you know? So status and attention are kind of like intertwined. And in the evolutionary psychology, like the attraction mind of a woman, it doesn't really matter which one it is. Attention is as attractive as status. Like, a good example is these guys I was hanging out with in London. They go around to clubs and bars, and, you know, they create a very fun environment around their table, you know, where they're just joking around, having a great time, and everyone's paying attention to them. And there could be a celebrity, like a professional athlete at the table next to them who's not going to get as much attention as them, but has objectively got more status than them on paper. But in that particular environment, they're getting more attention. So in that environment, they actually have more status. And so the women respond likewise.
How did you signal status prior to having a social media following?
Public speaking and running events. So back when I was at college, I used to run lots of social events. I used to get involved in lots of volunteer organizations. I used to get involved in like the local, like the student committees and all this sort of stuff and run parties and things like that. And there was actually one really interesting situation where after college when I was at this event, actually, I mentioned very early on where I went to this sort of youth entrepreneurship camp to learn about running, what entrepreneurship was, to start a business and stuff. And I'd been in the town, we're in Vilnius in Lithuania, and I'd been in this town like maybe 24, 48 hours before everyone else. We all stayed at the same hostel, and I'd just been in the town, slightly longer than everyone else. So I sort of walked around, knew the layout, and I knew a couple of good restaurants. And then that night, there's like 50 of us there, and we're all just sitting there in this town square talking, and everyone's like, where should we go to dinner? And I just like stood up on like a park bench and was like, yo, everybody, like, I know there's a really good restaurant down here. It's big enough to fit us all. Follow me. And I didn't think anything of that. And at the end of this event, I ended up hooking up with this girl. And she said to me, the moment you got up on that park bench and told everybody where to go was the moment I found you attractive. That was a pretty key like learning lesson for me. I was like, yeah, just standing up and commanding people, being a leader, standing up and grabbing everyone's attention and being confident in yourself like that. That is a very attractive trait.
Those things are super powerful. If done with confidence. If done poorly, they are.
Yeah, completely. Completely, yes. You can't do that. It's like people, especially women, are very good at like picking up on false bravado. They're exceptionally good at reading like subtle nuances in your body language. Far more than men are.
What causes a high sex drive in women?
Well, I know exactly what causes a high sex drive in men, and it's a lack of prolactin in the brain.
Really?
Yeah. So there's a massive, there's a big, like an exact correlation between like how much prolactin is in your head.
What's prolactin?
So prolactin is, in men, it's when a man finishes, right? His brain dumps prolactin, and that's the thing that gives you that sleepy, drowsy, cuddly feeling afterwards. That's prolactin. Now, when you don't release, like depending on how much you release, you will basically have a higher sex drive, and you will recover faster from an intimate session.
Would you say you're one of those people?
Probably naturally, yeah. I tend to have like, yeah. But I actually used to supplement with certain things to actually deliberately increase my sex drive based upon that biochemical principle. Because there was a study I found. This was when I was biohacking, when I was in the industry. There was a study I found about a dude who was naturally multi-orgasmic, and he had no refractory period. Refractory period is the time you need as a man between sessions, right, to recharge, let's say. He didn't have that at all. And they studied his brain. They studied his his blood, basically. And his brain just didn't dump prolactin after he had finished. And he was able to completely rise to the occasion again instantly and go again. I was like, this is an interesting study. I'm going to try this out. Yeah. And so if you can reduce your prolactin levels.
What do you take?
I actually have an entire supplement line based around this stuff. But there's a couple of real big ones, like vitamin B6 is a big one. Vitamin E does it too. There's a few things in there that you can supplement pretty daily with those things. It'll reduce your prolactin and it'll increase your dopamine, because these two are actually inversely correlated to one another. Is
there anything that just completely stops prolactin production?
Well, there's actually a pharmaceutical drug that is used for I believe it's either Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, called cabergoline, but that's quite dangerous. You're pharmaceutically bodybuilders have experimented with it, because I think bodybuilders use cabergoline for something else. I think they use it to offset I think maybe they use it to offset like estrogen or something. I'm not exactly certain about why they use it, but I've read on bodybuilding forums about guys using cabergoline and then having like ultra high sex drive and becoming multi-orgasmic. Yeah. I wouldn't recommend people do that though, because you're basically you're taking a lot of risks with like by using pharmacology to alter your brain chemistry. Like when I did it, I'm just using like what's called nutraceuticals, like vitamin, like things that are natural in nature. They're not like on the tier of a pharmaceutical drug, which is a lot more powerful and comes with like side effects. There's no free lunch, you know, when it comes to to changing your biochemistry like that. Yeah. But oddly enough, I've had women take this sort of same supplement stack and they've increased their sex drive.
Do women have a refractory period?
Doesn't appear to be. Not the same, not in the sense that men have them. No. They do get prolactin, but they use prolactin to lactate. Some definitely take a bit longer to like go into the next one, but they can be. It's obvious. It's nowhere near as on the level of like, at least personally, of being a bloke. It also depends upon the type of orgasm they've had, right? If it's a direct clitoral one, then it's very similar to the kind of sensations that men get, where it's like too much, all the blood flows there, all the sensations there, back off, don't touch me there, it's too sensitive, you know? Yeah, so it depends upon the type of orgasm.
So, sorry, what were you saying about a woman's high sex drive? Like what causes that usually?
What I was going to say, reducing prolactin has, like at least anecdotally with the people I know personally who've tried this, that has helped increase a woman's sex drive. So perhaps there is something there biologically I know exactly how the mechanism works for men. I don't actually quite know how that mechanism works with women, but at least anecdotally, it does appear to increase their sex drive if you can reduce a woman's prolactin levels too. But I think the broader question about what you're asking is basically like what makes a woman a nymphomaniac. You know, if I knew the answer to that, I think I would be a billionaire. Because if you can put that in a bottle and replicate it, I think we've just solved the marriage crisis.
It was really, I was watching one of your old podcasts, and the thing you were saying about being exposed to female pheromones is really interesting. Have you ever is there like any scent or like supplement that you can spray to get other females' pheromones to like reduce ED, increase sex drive as a man? Do you think that's a thing?
Yeah, I mean, well, you can smell a woman's. I'm not a big fan of like colognes and things like that. Like, I actually don't personally use any. I don't use any colognes. I actually don't even use deodorant.
I considered stopping recently because I was like, if you're eating somewhat healthy, it's like you're not going to smell horrible.
Like I do notice if I'm not eating healthy, I notice that I personally can tell that I smell a bit off. But the funny thing is that when I haven't used deodorant for probably like 2 years. Deodorants or colognes at all for like probably 2 years now. And I've never had the women I'm dating complain. In fact, they actually love my smell because it's not it's your natural biological smell.
Are those women usually taking birth control?
No. And that's a big thing because that does make a massive difference because there's a huge, you probably know exactly what I'm about to talk about. Yeah. There was an old, the t-shirt study that was done where they took a bunch of guys, had them not wear any colognes for a few days or any deodorants or scents or scented soaps or anything like that. And then they had them all run on treadmills and sweat into plain cotton t-shirts, bag those t-shirts up, and then got women to rank them according to what t-shirt smelled better. And women found a man's scent more attractive when they had basically it's to do with their immune system profiles not being so dissimilar, but not being super identical either. They have sort of this nice middle ground where, think about it like a cross-pollination between their two different immune systems would produce a child that is far more protected against a better variety of illnesses, diseases, bacterium, etc. So it's actually an indicator for like, if a woman likes the way you smell, you'll have healthy kids. Yeah. And birth control screws with it. Birth control causes women, in that study at least, and there's been a few other studies that talk about this as well, but birth control causes women to mate select completely differently than when they're off birth control in their natural hormonal cycle. They actually tend to select for men who are a lot more effeminate in their physical features and in their behavior and characteristics. Yeah, and then you wonder why. Then you wonder why when they get off birth control and they try to have a kid together, they end up divorcing each other after that. So I'm actually I'm anti-birth control because of that. Because you're actually like women are getting relationships with a guy and having a long-term relationship with him, and then they decide to settle down and actually have a kid. Well, they got to get off that birth control, and then they realize that they picked a guy that they actually don't find innately attractive, on a deep biological level, and it screws the relationship up, and they end up divorcing and they break a family apart.
I guess most people, like, it's really not that complicated to set up a system in your life to where you don't have to use birth control to have sex with your partner. But I guess from a porn star who's had sex with many women, like, how does the porn industry kind of do it? Like, are all these girls just doing Plan B? Are they on birth control, or is there more sophistication?
A lot of them are on birth control, but you'd be surprised. But not all of them. You'd be surprised how many of them are just freeballing, like throwing caution to the wind. Yeah, a lot more. I was shocked.
Do they track like their cycles to like kind of see when they're most fertile?
Tracking a woman's cycle is actually like super effective. Like it's not as easy as people think to get a woman like pregnant if you're not like,
right on the day.
If you're not in that fertile window, Now maybe just if you're doing it just before the fertile window, yeah, some of the sperm, the female sperm can stick around because they're like the long distance runners that sort of stick around a bit longer. So yeah, give it a few days either side. But like for like at least half the month, you ain't got anything to worry about.
Another thing guys worry about too much, does the size of it actually matter?
So here's an interesting thing. When guys talk about the size of it and when women talk about the size of it, they're actually talking about two completely different things for most cases. When dudes think of like a big thing, they think length. And when women think about a big thing, they think girth. So it's because from her perspective, like she feels it. Like she feels the fullness, this being stretched or whatever you want to call it. It's a far more intimate feeling for her than a long, thin one, poking around the back of the cervix somewhere, And some women don't actually like that. Can be kind of painful for some women, not all, some. But then again, there's sort of a happy medium, somewhere in between. And they've done this a survey which was kind of called like the husband dick survey, where they plotted this graph of like length and versus girth, and got women to sort of rank like which was pleasurable, which was more painful, et cetera, et cetera. And it created this like color scheme, and it was sort of like the husband dick like sweet spot was somewhere around like 8 in like the perfect one was like 8 inches in length and like 6.5 in girth, somewhere around there.
Let's go.
Yeah, so that's like that's like where it was sitting. But the thing is, like, there are things you can do to actually increase the size of it. I've literally done it. I teach guys literally how to do it. It's not like a magic pill that you take and it's just it's bigger the next day, and very committed to it.
Is it more about like actually lengthening the skin, or like
the shaft? It's about the shaft, the underlying like actual internal shaft.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's not about lengthening the skin, because that will just make the skin looser.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any way to just get more blood flow in the area?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of different ways.
Do you think that makes more of a difference for
That'll
most guys
definitely
than...
it'll give you the maximum amount of growth when you get aroused. You will be like, your erection will be a 11 out of 10. If you optimize things like blood flow. Kegels help with this. Jelking can help with it. Pumping can help with it. The different devices that can do this stuff. They'll get you the maximum amount of length you can possibly get, but they'll also actually increase the girth of things. And that's when she will probably notice it a lot more. Yeah, you come out, a good half an inch girthier, she's going to notice it. Yeah.
What do you tell guys? I'm sure you get a lot of men ask you like, my thing is only half the length of the ideal, It's like, what do you tell those guys?
There's a lot of tricks you can do in the bedroom that have nothing to do with your penis, which will blow a woman's mind.
Do you think those things are more important than actually lengthening it? Or do you think a lot of times it's just losing weight? Because most people are, I think I saw a study that most people are in the same size range anyway.
They've just got a big fat pad around the base of their penis. Yeah, there's a lot of that, especially for American guys who tend to be a bit on the heavier side. The reason I actually don't talk about it enough, to be perfectly honest, because I teach guys how to do it, but I don't necessarily teach guys like, hey, here's how you can actually add some size to your appendage for like the sake of being like, because women prefer it. You know what I'm saying? It's actually more of like a self-improvement angle for me. Because think about this for a second, right? If I told the average guy, hey, there's a way for you to gain like 3 inches in height naturally, safely. We're not putting you on, in that surgery where they lengthen the thigh bone or anything like that, right? If I don't know if there is a way to do this. I'm just saying, if I told guys that something you thought was completely impossible, you couldn't do, but then I show you like it's actually possible, and then you do it, what else in your life now becomes possible? Like if this thing that you didn't think you could change about your body, you've just changed. What does that imply? It implies you can definitely lose weight. It implies that you can probably become more charming. You can probably become a better public speaker. You can probably become a better networker. You can probably make more money. You can probably develop a whole bunch of skills that you didn't think you could possibly do before because you didn't have the self-esteem to do it. You didn't think it was possible. It's a bit like the 8-minute mile? Was it the 8-minute, 10-minute mile? When that guy with the bloke who broke the barrier originally for like how fast you can run a mile, and then within like 12 months a bunch of people like broke it after him. It's kind of like that, but on a personal psychological level, and it is a pain point for a lot of guys. They're like self-conscious about it, and a big part of that is because of pornography, right? So they're self-conscious about it. And I'm like, look, rather than being like self-conscious and having this like looming over your head, how about I show you like how you can actually change it, get that monkey off your back, and then realize that because if you can change that, you can change all these other aspects of your life, which you might have like a problem with, that might be causing all these other insecurities in your life, So it's more about that. It's more about, it's like a meta, like self-help kind of angle for me when I teach these guys this, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's similar with fitness. Like women care about fitness, but only the first few seconds in which they see you, And it's more about the fact that he does work out, less about like what it actually looks like. But
yes. And the way you carry yourself because you work out.
What do you think is the biggest lie women tell men about sex?
Like sex and relationships is this thing that men are just sort of supposed to know how to do from like the moment they come out the womb. Like no one's like really, we have sex ed in school, but it doesn't teach you how to do it well, I think if there was something, it would be the idea that like some men have it and others don't. Some guys just get it and others will never get it, which is completely not true. It's like riding a bicycle. Like it's a skill set, like anything. You can learn how to do it. You can learn the intricacies of a woman's body, because most women are basically wired up 99% the same. There's certain buttons that you can press which are going to be received very positively. There's certain moves you can do, tips and techniques you can do in the bedroom, which women are typically, across the population, are going to respond to quite well. So there's like this idea that you're either born with it or you're not, you either have it or you don't, is complete horseshit. Like it's a learnable skill, like anything else.
When you think about all these methods and all these techniques, consuming your content for a while, I think personally, it's kind of had the effect on me that it's like, because it's a skill to master, you're kind of thinking about like the game you're playing, rather than like enjoying it for yourself. And I think that can maybe happen to some people, that they're just doing things to make her have the most amount of fun possible. Like, how do you kind of find that balance? Like when you are with a woman, are you thinking about her pleasure, or are you thinking about your pleasure more?
It's a good question. I think if you're starting out and you're trying to learn some new skills, you have to like you'll have to focus on them to kind of make them second nature, to get them like locked in, you know, and then you can start once you know you have a certain skill set, it's so you can then switch off and be selfish every now and then. It's totally okay. I do get guys kind of asking this question a lot, and it's like, at what point can I enjoy it? At what point can I be selfish again? It's totally okay to like have one just for yourself every now and then. but what I would say though is the first impression or the first couple of impressions are where you kind of want to show up with your A game. You know, keep it like if you set that as the standard at the very beginning, you show what you're capable of. You know how much pleasure you can give a woman. You can blow her mind, and then it's in a way, you know, that creates that dynamic where she's lusting after you, where sex is more of a reward for her than it is for you. And I think that dynamic is usually the other way around. Most guys would perceive sex to be a reward for him in a relationship. But if you really know like how to rock a woman's world in the bedroom, that dynamic completely turns around. And now sex is like basically a reward for her, which changes the dynamic completely. So it's okay to like, I think, knock it out of the park the first few times, you know, and then take the gas off a little bit, and then keep it. It's like a slot machine. When you pull that lever on a slot machine, you don't win every single time, but when you do, you get really excited about it, you know. So it's okay to turn that into an intermittent thing, because that makes it actually more special. Yeah. And it means you can actually just relax and enjoy yourself every now and then. You don't have to be on 100% of the time all the time. Yeah. Once you have these sort of skill sets like locked in, you know?
Have you ever like found a woman that like you couldn't figure out how to please her?
Especially when I was sort of still going through and like learning all this stuff. Yeah, definitely. But it's also a case of patience and do I care? You know, like there was probably certain women who I actually didn't really care about leaving a good impression with them either. So I wasn't going to put in the extra effort to do that.
Has there ever been a case where like you did care and like you went kind of into the research and it's like, what's different about this one, or no?
Definitely earlier on, like as I was a young man, because I've been like autistically obsessed with this topic since I was in like the 20s. Like I've been a real nerd about sex for a long time, which is probably why I'm good at teaching it. You know, I've kind of had this obsessive compulsion with it and just understanding it. So definitely when I was in my 20s, there was definitely cases like that. And that, you know, caused me to like try and learn and understand more, you know. But these days, if I wanted to, it wouldn't be hard. Some women obviously take a lot longer. And a lot of that comes down to her psychology and emotion in the moment too. Because a woman like really needs to be able to switch off her thinking conscious brain to get into the state where she can climax. If she's ruminating and thinking too much and maybe is too self-conscious even, it will stop her from being able to climax. So a big part of and that's something you actually can't control all the time, you know, especially if it's a new woman, right? Now, if you're in a relationship, obviously you know her a lot better. You're a lot more in tune with her. You can help her relax and calm down and be less anxious. But if she's in that headspace, you have to get her out of that headspace first. Otherwise, nothing's going to work.
Is sex an energy exchange for men the same way it is for women?
Yeah, you're giving your energy to the woman.
Because maybe this wasn't you, but Andrew, Tristan, Justin have maybe mentioned that sex with too many men can hurt a woman emotionally. Do you think this is possible for a guy?
People ask me that a lot. It's like, the only thing I would say from the guy's perspective, if you've been with a lot of women, the novelty can wear off faster with one individual woman. If there's not like that sexual chemistry and that sexual tension that I mentioned before. You know, it is easier to get bored of a woman sexually if you have been with a lot of women. Doesn't mean you hate her. Doesn't mean you don't like her. Doesn't mean the relationship won't be good necessarily, like outside of the sex. But you can find it harder to just be sexually interested in that woman long term. And I know this because I get guys who are very successful, very good looking, friends of mine, not the ones that you've had on this podcast, but other ones who literally ask me the question like, bro, I'm just not into my girlfriend or my missus anymore. What do I do? Like that is it's like the dead bedroom scenario, but it's from the guy's perspective, not the girl. It's the opposite problem to what usually happens, where she doesn't want to have sex with him because she doesn't respect him anymore, doesn't find him attractive anymore. It's the reverse of that, where the guy is like not stimulated by her anymore because he's so used to her. You know, it's not as exciting. So that is a problem that's actually harder to fix, but it's also a lot rarer. There's far less men on this earth that are in that situation than the other way around.
This question's for me, so this isn't me judging you. I'm not perfect by any means, but I never got to ask Waller, Andrew, Tristan this. I thought you would have a particularly interesting perspective. So you're religious, you're Christian, right?
I'm not baptized, but I've had a lot of, since I started asking the religious question, I've had a lot of synchronicities, so to speak.
With Christianity?
With Christianity in particular, yeah.
When you say Christian, do you try to aim your life in a way that is aligned with God?
Well, I think God is truth.
Okay. And then do you see sleeping with multiple women, like dating multiple women, aligned with truth?
It's a good question. I know the answer that people want me to say is no. A man isn't able to sleep with multiple women by default, right? He has to become something and he has to do certain things to be deemed attractive to women. And those things would be considered truths, right? You know? So the ability, like, would I say that like necessarily sleeping with a bunch of women is the truth? No, but I would say being attractive to women is truth. To be considered attractive by lots of women, you need to understand certain things about the fundamental natures of men and women, the fundamental nature of reality, you know, a truth. So without that truth, you will not be able to unlock that level of access, you know? So is the act of like sleeping with a bunch of women in line with Christianity? Obviously not, because it's pretty clear, I think. Although there is one Twitter account I follow who does make the argument that it's a very interesting Twitter account. I can find it for you afterwards if you want. And they make the argument that the Bible doesn't actually explicitly deny men from taking on multiple wives in the Christian Bible. It's a very interesting. He gets in lots of arguments on Twitter with Christians. So it's just reading the arguments is very, very interesting.
Should Christians have sex before marriage?
Good question. There's a Christian answer and then there's a practical answer. The Christian answer is no. The practical answer is twofold. One, it's obvious. It's very clear that a virgin man and a virgin woman make the most successful marriage, the most successful relationship. They very rarely divorce. Objectively, that is the best case scenario. Now, practically, are we in a situation where that is likely to happen? On the guy's end, yes. On the woman's end, no, actually. So we're more likely to find a situation with a virgin man and a woman who's actually had some kind of sexual interaction with a guy. Maybe she's not a virgin. Maybe she just did something with her hands in her mouth. I don't know. But it's so much easier for a woman to get access, right, to sex and sexuality. Now, I've got my friend Myron Gaines. He's pretty famous for saying that he thinks men should sleep with 50 women before settling down and finding a woman. And people will give him a lot of flack for that, but there's an element of truth to what he's saying. And I'm not saying that 50 is the number, right? What I am saying is that certain men take more experiences than others to figure out female nature. Because it's not even necessarily about like the sex and being good at sex. It's about it's about having like enough intimate relationships with women to understand women and understand where you can trip up and where you can lose their respect and lose the relationship. And again, like, I think if we expect men to come out the womb and know this stuff without any education or training, we're setting them up for failure. So if you don't want guys to sleep around with women attractive enough and understand women enough so that they can lead a relationship successfully, well, then you're going to need to educate them pretty intensely. You know, it's like, I couldn't teach you how to like be a mechanic and build like a car from scratch if I didn't make you get your hands dirty every now and then. Like it's pretty hard to learn this through pure theory.
Do you remember how many women it was for you before you were kind of like, I'm pretty good at this?
Probably took me like 100. I'm not gonna lie. I was a very like, not with the sex stuff, but with the female nature stuff. It took me a lot longer to finally like get it. Because I had to get rid of this notion that men and women are exactly the same, you know. And I think that's kind of the default programming we give guys in our society now is like men and this blank slate egalitarian idea that men and women are exactly the same in all aspects of life, and they respond to the same things. They have the same hierarchy of needs and interests and attractions. Like this, we're treating them exactly the same is complete folly. So you have to like discard that programming. And I think a lot of the stuff that the red pill movement, the manosphere movement on the internet has done is actually to help guys get to that point quicker. Because what happens though, people talk about the manosphere or red pill being like really toxic and bad for men and stuff. It's the opposite, man. It's saving guys' lives. It's stopping them from themselves. Like it's stopping guys from lashing out at women. Ironically, and I know this, you'll see the opposite on if you go on Twitter. Twitter is a very toxic environment in general. But think about this, like the reason guys get butthurt and frustrated with women is because they're expecting women to be something they're not. They have this fantasy in their head of what a woman is and how a woman should behave and respond to him, when in reality, she is actually going to do something totally different. And so his expectations and his reality aren't matching up. So he's getting frustrated and angry and he's lashing out and getting bitter and resentful at women. If you take that same guy and actually tell him, look, women aren't necessarily sugar and spice and all things nice. They have a light side and a dark side. And you don't want to get manipulated by the dark side, you know, and here's how you bring out the best in her, you know, by these things we've talked about before, being decisive, being a leader, being more masculine, etc. You get a better experience with women. And she enjoys the experience better too. And it's more harmonious. And now that guy is not bitter and resentful towards women. Now he actually gets to see the best aspects of women. Whereas a lot of guys, unfortunately, they end up seeing a very bad aspect of women when they're in a dead bedroom relationship or she's constantly nagging and testing him because she doesn't respect him anymore. And he wasn't equipped with the tools to prevent that in the first place.
You just reminded me when I was 19, I read Rollo's book. I think that's been the book I've recommended to the most people, like whether they're asking me about money or anything. I'm just like, read The Rational Male.
He gets so, and Rollo gets like, people do not understand Rollo at all. Like he is one of the most misunderstood men on the internet. The amount of flack that people throw at him, and they never read his book in the first place. Like the entire. It's not a. People think red pill is like a philosophy. It's not a philosophy. It's a what's the exact word? It's pragmatic. You read like the first couple of chapters of the book, and like his intent, like he wrote it to stop dudes from killing himself. That's why he wrote the thing, because he had someone in his life who I think might have been an in-law who like himself, you know, over this stuff, over being heartbroken. You know, he saved countless lives. And people don't give him credit for that. It's horrible. He deserves all the credit in the world for that.
You said Bonnie Blue didn't sleep with 1,000 men in 24 hours.
Yeah, logistically, that's impossible. Like, if you break it down, like, okay, well, how are we defining sleeping with men for a start? Does it mean the man has to finish? Does it mean a blowjob? Does it mean a hand job? Does it mean he's in the room? You know what I'm saying? Like, from what I saw with like the time frame, the time window. Logistically, it didn't add up. The math didn't math. Yeah.
What causes ED? Do you think it's more physical or mental?
There are two different types of it. So now you're getting a lot of younger guys who are having what's called porn-induced erectile dysfunction, which is entirely mental because they're young. There's nothing wrong with their biology. There's nothing wrong with their hormones. You don't develop, arterial plaques at like 18, 19, 20. It takes a bit longer than that. So their problem is their overstimulation of their dopamine receptors from consuming excessive pornography, which makes women less novel and exciting in person, which means they don't get that same physiological response from being around a real woman, so they don't rise to the occasion. Now, older guys, it tends to be more of a blood flow thing. It's cleaning out the arteries. It's about increasing nitric oxide production, getting plenty of nitrates in the diet in your system, so your body can produce nitric oxide, which allows your blood vessels to dilate and expand and allows you to get an erection. Yeah, so it's different, two very different solutions for two very different categories of men. And a lot of the time, I'll add something else in there too. A lot of the time, guys will mistake performance anxiety for erectile dysfunction. Performance anxiety is it's mostly mental. It's nervousness. You're just anxious. I've been on set with scenes where there's like a bunch of dudes sharing like a woman, right? You'll get like a new guy whose face is like bright red because he's slammed like 2 Viagra and he's not rising to the occasion at all because he's in his head. People think that little blue pill is like some magical cure-all. But that example proves that you don't get an erection by having good blood flow. An erection starts up here. You have to be aroused. There has to be some stimulus for the body to respond to in the first place. And if you're nervous and anxious and your body's in fight or flight mode, it ain't happening. So that's actually performance anxiety. So a lot of guys will end up with a chick, they get the floppy because they're too anxious, and then they reach for a little blue pill or they think they've got erectile dysfunction. Not necessarily. Most of the time, it's probably more to do with their nerves and they've got their brain in the wrong spot. They're worried about. It just tends to actually happen when they're with a girl who's really, really attractive. Like the best one. It's more often not. The exact story I'll get from guys is, with every other woman, I don't have this problem. With this one girl who I really like, who's really special, I get this problem. They're overthinking it. They're caring too much. They're in their head too much. And so they have that problem. Yeah.
Is it the same with premature?
They're very intimately linked. Premature ejaculation is a form of anxiety, or results from anxiety. It's a type of performance anxiety. You actually get the two together quite often. So you get a situation where the dude can't get it up. He gets it up for like 30 seconds and then he finishes instantly because he's so bloody nervous. Yeah, they're both anxiety conditions. So you need to learn how to calm the mind. There's also a bunch of different things you can do to help with, both performance anxiety and with premature ejaculation. With the performance anxiety side of things, increasing your DHT actually helps. Because DHT is kind of like, it's like the confidence molecule. It's like that calm assertiveness. Guys who have high DHT, they tend to be like very calm under pressure. So if you can you can supplement. Again, I have a supplement that does exactly this too. But if you supplement to increase DHT, not just increase testosterone, but specifically to increase more DHT, you will find yourself a lot more calm in these stressful situations. With the premature ejaculation side of things, you can actually hack your biology to increase GABA. GABA is a sort of like relaxation, like a hormone, and your body will respond accordingly. So you're going to be less anxious, you're going to be less excited, less wound up, and then you'll be able to last incredibly longer. And there's actually like a hormone that's kind of the opposite of kind of counters GABA in a way. It's glutamate, and we actually eat a lot of it. in the form of monosodium glutamate, also known as MSG. A lot, basically every food you eat that's out of a packet, every fast food, lots of restaurant food, or junk food, packed full of the stuff. So guys, if they're having a lot of premature ejaculation, check your diet and cut that shit out. It might be one of the first things that'll you can do that'll help you to see better results.
I wouldn't think that would affect the premature. That's really interesting.
Yeah, glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter, so it makes you more anxious.
Here was a question I had for you, because I saw a clip a while back of you saying like what to do to like kind of cool yourself off and be like less excited. But I've heard from like just various other men, and I think this one book, maybe The Multi-Orgasmic Male, something like that. I don't know if you've read that one. It was like actually you, instead of like trying to picture other stuff in your head while you're with a woman to kind of like cool yourself off, you should fully lean into it and experience it. Have you ever heard that philosophy before?
That makes sense, because it's you're trying to be present. Like that which you resist persists is a psychological principle. If you're trying to if your thought pattern is like, I'm anxious, oh God, I don't want to be anxious, you're thinking, the thought that's still going through your head is the anxiety, rather than like acceptance. It's this kind of principle from meditation, which is like, to make it like go away, you have to kind of accept that it's there. It's like a good analogy I've heard before is like, imagine if you're sitting at a train station. Every train that turns up at the platform is like a thought. You don't have to get on that train and follow that thought endlessly. You can let the thought come and then let it go again, and let a different thought come in and let that one go. So you don't have to like latch onto it and engage with it. So it does make sense, that principle. It's these things of like controlling your thoughts, ridiculously hard to do. Like, so there's a lot of different ways to tackle it, because a lot of people can't control their mind. I mean, like Buddhist monks spend their entire life trying to do it. Yeah. So there's a bunch of different ways you can tackle that, like that problem of how do I control the thoughts that are going in and out of my head.
Do you think most of the male stars that you worked with or met, like they're either extremely high IQ, good control of their mind, or just lower IQ and didn't think that much?
They're all pretty, I wouldn't say they're super high IQ, but I also wouldn't say they're like low IQ. I'd say they're pretty, IQ wise, they're probably run of the mill, but they're definitely people who are more kinesthetic. So they're not cerebral.
Like they're more in their body than their brain.
Way more in their body. A lot of them are athletes. A lot of guys were former collegiate athletes. A bunch of dudes who were like, there's guys who are like track runners, boxers, PE teachers, lots of this. Like classical trained actors, like stage actors. Lots of these kind of guys. Very common. So they're more kinesthetic, and their thinking brain is another friend of mine who's still in the industry, Nathan Bronson. He's a stuntman. So like,
sounds like they're kind of used to being physically excited.
Yeah, they can control their heart rate in a competitive and very physically like exciting environment.
Have you always prioritized fitness yourself?
I've always played sports. I was always playing sports as a kid, and then after I kind of stopped playing sports, I was always just in the gym. Yeah. But always been physical. I love like hiking and that kind of stuff personally. I can walk all day, every day. I not get bored of it. Yeah.
Who's the most impressive person you've ever met?
It's got to be Justin Waller. Has to be. He's like there's so much about Justin that people don't see because they're not like around him, 24/7. He is so incredibly competent in so many ways, and he's got so many little like workarounds with the way he works, the way he's so good at managing people, like ridiculously good at reading people, very good at networking, obviously a good athlete, obviously very disciplined, knows like he has to be about 140 IQ minimum. just by the way he processes things so quickly, like his strategic business brain is incredible. Yeah. And he's just a great guy to be around. And he's a genuine guy. Like he's like, again, people don't see this side of him. Like I've been around like him and his kids. I've seen the way he interacts with his daughters. Like he's an incredible father and a very deliberate and conscious father as well. And then he's also like that to all of his employees. He's also like that to all of his friends. Yeah, just so genuine. And I think people can get an impression of a guy from what they see online or from clips that go viral, And I think a lot of people have a completely not necessarily the wrong impression of Justin because he has a lot of fans, right? But they're missing a lot of what Justin is. And yeah, very honored to call him a friend. He's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Justin's kind of like, sure, he likes women, but like that's kind of a consequence of him having all the other things.
He's also completely unapologetic, which is so rare,
It's interesting what you said about the 140 IQ. I'm from Kentucky, and when I've met really intelligent people, like people from the South act extremely different than people from the city or people from small towns, like who are smarter. And Sterling, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
The best piece of advice I ever received would have come from one of my first mentors, Simon Black, and he taught me to think about money as compressed time. Because we exchange money for everything you spend money on is really just a way of saving time. So like if you needed to get your sink fixed, you need to call a plumber in. That plumber has spent a certain amount of time developing a certain skill set and understanding how to fix that problem. You could probably learn how to do it yourself, but you'd have to invest a certain requisite amount of time to do that. So instead, you're going to exchange this thing we call money for his time, which will be a lot smaller for him because he's already spent the time investing into like developing that skill set, right? Or you offer a product or a service which saves people time, fixes a problem for them, so they don't have to go out and fix it themselves, And once he taught me that, I then started to look at business from the perspective of solving problems. How can I solve problems for people? Which is literally what I do now. Is why I'm successful in business, is because all I've done is just figured out how to solve problems as quickly and efficiently and directly as I can for people, and as specifically as I can. So that lesson completely changed the course of my life.
I really like that one. I think I do have to ask you, since you're a little more niche on your topics, like what's the best piece of sexual advice you've ever received?
I think the best piece of sexual advice I can give guys is to flip the dynamic of sex on its head, where in the relationship, she views sex more as a reward for her than you view sex as a reward for you. If you can establish that dynamic by being, good in bed and rocking her world, it fixes a lot of problems. If she is so into you and wants it so much from you, a lot of things fall into place.
And then what's the best piece of advice you would give to a woman in sex?
There is nothing sexier than enthusiasm.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, everyone, this has been your guest, Sterling Cooper. This is the Jack Neel podcast. Where can people find you?
SterlingCooper.com is the one-stop shop. Sterling is spelled STIRLING. That's the Australian way of spelling it, not the American way of spelling it. And my YouTube channel, again, typing Sterling Cooper, I'm the thing that comes up. Same on Instagram and on Twitter. You can find me at Sterling Wisdom. And I give out, I try to give out as much free, practical, useful advice as I possibly can.
Beautiful. See you guys.
Awesome, man. Thank you.